Hi everyone, this is show 6. We're doing chapter 6 of the series on Esther. We're joined again by Rabbi Neely. Thank you, Rabbi Neely.
Thank you.
We're going to jump straight in. If you want a previously on Esther, we're kind of approaching halfway now, so if you want to catch up, you're free to watch the other shows.
The halfway thing is actually really, really important. One of the most common structures in biblical literature is to use the midpoint as being the main point. So we see that in many Psalms, where rather than using the typical Anglo-Saxon tradition of having a thesis sentence and all of that at the beginning, your main point is often right in the middle, and often will be bracketed by what's known as a chiastic structure, where the first and last verses line up, the second and second to last verse line up in theme or in counterpoint. And indeed, this chapter 6 is really the transformational moment. We saw that a bit in 5, and now that's going to be reinforced in 6, where all of the turns of fortune are completely flipped around.
That's excellent. That's like a great trailer for the show. I think I read somewhere that the middle word in the whole of the Tanakh is the word for stomach. Like right in the middle, there's a stomach. I thought that was kind of cool. I don't know if it's true, but worth looking up. Okay. That night, sleep deserted the king, and he ordered the book of records, the annals, to be brought, and it was to be read to the king. So there is one of two things going on here. He's either super bored and this always puts him to sleep, or he was laying there anxious because he thought maybe he could be doing a better job and was looking for ideas. What do you think?
Well, yeah, it's at least according to the sages, it's pretty much both. That the idea that he couldn't sleep, one opinion is that this was a miracle. This is God actually giving him a little push in the back of his brainstem to make him notice something that was going to lead to our redemption, which is the advancement of Mordechai. The other thing is that he may have just been anxious and building off the idea that the Midrashim say that the reason Esther is orchestrating her whole party time with the king and Haman was to create jealousy and mistrust in the king about Haman. That this may be him wondering, what is she up to? Are they plotting against me? And if that's the case, then he may be looking through his book in order to see who else can I rely on if these two are becoming unstable. And that's why he latches on to Mordechai, who had helped him overcome an assassination.
Okay. And said event is referenced in verse 2. There it was found written that Mordecai had denounced Bigtana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, who had plotted to do away with King Ahasuerus. I've been practicing. What honor or advancement has been conferred on Mordecai for this? The king inquired. Nothing at all has been done for him, replied the king's servants who were in attendance on him. Who is in the court? The king asked. When I did the initial read-through on this, I kind of thought maybe he's asking who is in the court, and it's related to the previous question, but it seems to me that maybe the king had heard, because from the next line you get that the king's kind of heard footsteps or something. Who is in the court? The king asked. For Haman had just entered the outer court of the royal palace to speak with the king about having Mordecai impaled on the stake he had prepared for him. So previously, Haman, with the help of his wife, who obviously loves a good staking, had decided amongst themselves that Mordecai not only was going to die, but the manner of his death.
Right. So this whole who is in the court point is, it could be that he's noticed that somebody's coming in, but it seems more in keeping with Ahasuerus' character that he doesn't make decisions without consulting his advisors.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And so basically he's come to this point where he realizes, we didn't do anything for Mordecai, and right now I kind of need friends. I can't decide on my own. I guess I have to ask who's around that I can consult with. And so he's like, okay, so who's available for me to chat with about this? Who can I bounce the ideas off of? And Haman, coincidentally, miraculously, not for him, is out there waiting, because remember, you're not allowed to walk into the king's presence without being invited, or else, you could die unless he points the scepter at you. So he's just hanging around outside, hoping to be invited to come talk to the king. And this is, of course, what he has in mind is that he wants to kill Mordecai. So it's just the ultimate irony of ironies that he wants to kill Mordecai, and the king is going to be asking him about how to honor Mordecai.
"It is Haman standing in the court," the king's servant answered him. "Let him enter," said the king. Haman entered, and the king asked him, "What should be done for a man whom the king desires to honor?" Haman said to himself, "Whom would the king desire to honor more than me?" It says a lot about Haman's ego, because up to this point, I don't think Haman's actually done anything.
Oh, well. I mean, so we don't get a lot of on-screen Haman success stories. That's partly because we're the ones writing the book. But I mean, we do definitely know that, he was the second in the kingdom, which means he was doing something. And we do also know that he probably has the right to feel, happy, because the queen is throwing this party for just him and the king. And remember, he went home to his family and bragged about that. So it says something about his character that he immediately assumes it's just himself. It's going to say a lot more about his character once he's made that assumption with what he proposes that the king do. But the fact that his life is currently riding high, that's who he is, right? He is at the top of his game. So yeah, who else in the kingdom would the king need to honor?
Okay. So Haman said to the king, "For the man whom the king desires to honor, let royal garb which the king has worn be bought, and a horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal diadem has been set. And let the attire and the horse be put in the charge of one of the king's noble courtiers. And let the man whom the king desires to honor be attired and paraded on the horse through the city square, while they proclaim before him, 'This is what has been done for the man whom the king desires to honor.'" So it's kind of an interesting, I mean, you might say in that instance, give them a huge house, give them a huge parcel of money, but he wants to dress as the king, be looked at as the king.
Yeah. And that's the problem, right? I mean, as far as Ahasuerus is concerned, that, here we already could imagine him being a little suspicious of Haman because of the whole party thing. But when Haman talks about honoring someone, what does he reach for? He reaches for dressing the guy like a king. And that's a real big no-no in most ancient cultures. And you will notice that by the time he gets from verse 8 to verse 9, the thing he's not mentioning is the crown. Right? He mentions a crown in verse 8, but by the time he gets to verse 9, he's like, and we just do the horse and the clothes thing. We're not going to actually put the crown on this guy. And Rashi even explicitly says that's because he could tell the king was getting a little uncomfortable with his description.
Okay. "Quick then," said the king to Haman, "get the garb and the horse, as you have said, and do this to Mordecai the Jew, who sits in the king's gate. Omit nothing of all that you have proposed." So I would have loved to have been there at that point, just to see his face fall.
That's the sad trombone moment.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, he sets himself up and then he walks into it. And again, so I think I mentioned before, if we were reading this as part of a Greek play, this is his tragic flaw. His hubris has now led him into the place where if he had just kept his mouth shut, if he had just been more modest, or if he'd asked a question, he would have been able to diffuse all of this. I mean, imagine if rather than saying, well, I'm sure he must be honoring me, he said, "Oh, well, who is it you wish to honor, your majesty, and for what, reason?" And when he says, "Oh, Mordecai the Jew," for exposing the plot, Haman could have easily twisted that to his advantage and say, well, I've actually got information that Mordecai was in league with them, or Mordecai was planning his own assassination attempt, or Mordecai is, secretly violating the king's laws, and blah, 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 blah. So he could have turned that to his advantage if he hadn't just jumped the gun. If he hadn't, immediately thought, "Ooh, the king's going to honor me because I'm the most honor-worthy person." it's his own pride that brings him down. He had every opportunity to take Mordecai out and to take the rest of us out, and he blew it.
So Haman took the garb and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and paraded him through the city square, and he proclaimed before him, "This is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor." I wonder. I mean, Haman was in a position where he could have got any of the king's courtiers to walk in front and say that, but he did it himself as to remove any. I mean, it must be at that point. You've decided you're going to do something bad with something, and then you get caught nearly. So at that point, you start erasing any evidence.
This is where you start shredding the documents.
Right. So maybe his version of shredding the documents was to be the person that walked in front of the horse.
Oh, no, he was told to walk in front of the horse.
Didn't he say get a courtier to do it? I mean,
so Haman suggested that you should put one of the king's noble people in front of it. And the king said, "Great, you do it."
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because, you are one of those people. So yeah, Haman was thinking, get one of the other muckety-muck nobles to lead my horse around. And, of course, the king flipped that around by going for the highest ranking official to give honor. So that meant Haman was the guy with the horse.
So they go around the city square, and then Mordecai returns to the king's gate, while Haman hurried home, his head covered in mourning. So this bit immediately jumped out. Wouldn't it be a little bit? Wouldn't people be asking a question about why his head was covered in mourning?
So there's a great midrash in the Talmud about this, where Haman's daughter saw them going through the street, and because they were each dressed in their ceremonial garb, she didn't know who was what, but she assumed, like her dad, that the only person that her father, the only person who would be honored would be her father. So she assumed the guy on the horse must be her father Haman, and the guy leading it must be Mordecai. And so she dumped the chamber pot over Haman's head, assuming that it was Mordecai.
Right. Okay. All right.
And so of course, and Haman, of course, then had a very good reason to go home, if only to wash his head.
Okay, I had never heard that before. All right. There, Haman, after washing his hair, told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had befallen him. I love the word befalling in the context of a chamber pot. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish stock, you will not overcome him. You will fall before him to your ruin." So at this point, are they saying that because he's Jew? I mean, why would the fact? I mean, it's one thing to say that, okay, Mordecai is on the turn, he's doing very well now, and is being, he's the man of the moment. But I'm not sure why he, being Jewish, would have influence.
So the connection that our midrashim does is actually back to the vision that God gives to Abraham, that our people will be like the stars of the sky and like the dust of the earth. And she basically takes it to mean that if the Jewish people are falling, then they are like dust. But if they are rising, then they are like the stars. So she's sort of doing her astrology here, saying that the Jewish people are either at the top or they're at the bottom. And if they're going up, that is to say, if their stock is rising, then yeah, they're going to end up way on top. And that means you're going down.
Okay.
So that's why the Jewishness of Mordecai is being used according to the traditional commentary. That's basically Judaism, Jewish history for Zeresh is binary. We're either the dust or we're the stars. And if we were the dust, then Haman had a chance. But now that it looks like we're becoming stars, then yeah, Haman missed his chance.
That's a super poetic outlook. I don't know if I don't like it a little bit, because it seems that's the way the history's gone.
It's interesting, although, most of our history has actually been fairly stable, nearer to the bottom. But, the thing that I find really ironic here is that, Sarah, you could have mentioned that yesterday.
Right.
Because remember, she was the one who said that, just impale the guy, and then you can be happy when you go to the party. Like, how about you give me this information that, if he's Jewish, it can go one of two ways. Then I know what risk I'm getting into.
You wonder whether she's like a typical, atypical political partner. She's sick of him whining all the time, so she's like, just do this really outlandish thing. And then if it works, she'll look great, they'll look great. But now, if he goes down, she's definitely going down. And
as well as all of their kids.
Right, so now she's saying, maybe you should hold off. It doesn't look like this is a good idea after all. As they say here, chill your boots. 14. While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurriedly brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. That is the end of 6, and next week we will be on to 7, and I assume things really start to go badly for Haman.
We get the real, denouement of the final exposition and exposure of Haman. But do notice throughout this chapter that there's been a sense of hurriedness, right? Really beginning with the party that Esther starts putting together. All of the events begin now with an urgency that we hadn't really seen up to this point. Things were taking months or years to happen, and now it's just bam, 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 all of these things. And that is sort of like this tipping point of the story, where there's no longer an opportunity for Haman to pull himself out of this, that he has put himself in such a position where his fall is now unavoidable. It's really very similar to the story of Pharaoh, where he also reached a tipping point in his rejection of the request for the freedom of the slaves, that at a certain point there was no way for him to get out of it.
Very good. Yeah. All right. Okay. We're going to finish up here. Everyone listening at home, thank you very much for tuning in and watching this show. Don't forget to head over to Rabbi Neely's channel. There'll be links on the video and under the video. You can go over there and watch the many different programs that are going up freshly every week. And thank you. If you've enjoyed the show, give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you all again very soon.